Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Gimel, Daf 3 of Masechta Beitzah. Friends, Daf Gimel of Masechta Beitzah, we continue in our understanding of the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding an egg that was born on Yom Tov. Yesterday we saw the opinions of Rabbah and Rav Nachman. Today we're going to see the opinions of Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchak. After that, we're going to try to understand the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to Beitzah Shnolda B'Yom Tov, and we're going to see 3 ways to understand Rabbi Yehuda's opinion there. And then we bring a Beitzah to question the different opinions regarding the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding Beitzah Shnolda B'Yom Tov, and in the context of that, we get into mixtures and how things can be batel in majorities. So kind of a lot of, it's like a very compact, dense, a lot of stuff on this daf. So let us jump in. We're going to start on daf Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Rav Yosef HaMegzer Mishum Peres HaNoshun. So Rav Yosef's opinion, so let's maybe review quickly what we saw yesterday. We started off yesterday with the opinion of Rav Nachman, who says that we're talking about a chicken that is meant for laying eggs, which means that the chicken is muktzah as well as the eggs are muktzah. And it's a question between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, do you hold of muktzah or not, essentially. Rabbah says no, we're talking about a chicken that's meant to be for food. You're going to eat the chicken. And therefore, technically speaking, the egg should also be considered food. So what's the problem with it? The problem is that we have to be worried about hachana. That if Yom Tov falls out on a Sunday, and the egg is laid on Yom Tov on Sunday, memele, it was prepared in the chicken the day before on Shabbos, which means that you're preparing from Shabbos to Yom Tov, which is a problem of hachana, of preparation. And Rabbah says, therefore, you're not allowed to eat the chicken, you're not allowed to eat the egg, on account of the hachana. And even if Yom Tov is in the middle of the week, it makes no difference because out of concern for the situations, when Yom Tov is on a Sunday, we also don't eat eggs that are laid on Yom Tov, even if they fall out during the week. Fine. Now we see the opinion of Rav Yosef. What Rav Yosef is saying is he agrees with Rabbah in that we're talking about a chicken that's for eating. Okay, so if it's talking about a chicken that's for eating, so shouldn't I be able to eat the eggs as well? So says Rav Yosef, Gezer Mishum Peres HaNoshun. Says Rav Yosef, well, if we have a fruit tree, let's say an apple tree, and you're walking by an apple tree on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and you find an apple lying on the floor, can you eat the apple? The answer is no. Because we're concerned that if you eat the apple, so then you might end up then wanting a second apple, and you'll climb up on the tree and chop an apple from the tree, and that's of course not allowed. It's a problem of kotzer, harvesting. So therefore you're not allowed to eat the fruits that are on the floor, that kind of fall from the tree, out of concern that you might climb up the tree and chop the fruit from the tree. And says Rav Yosef that you're not allowed to eat the egg that comes from the chicken, because if you eat the egg from the chicken, you might eat the apples that fell from the tree, and if you eat the apples that fall from the tree, you might then climb up the tree and chop the apple yourself, which is a problem. Amalei Abai, to which Abai says to Rav Yosef, Peres HaNoshun Taimamai, Gzer Shemayai Levietlosh. 1 second, I don't understand. What's the problem with fruits that fell off of the tree? Well, if you eat the fruits that fell off of the tree, you might then go and chop the fruit directly from the tree. So he gufa gezerah. So the only reason why we don't eat fruits that fell from a tree is itself a gezerah derabanan. Midoraisa, there's nothing wrong with eating a fruit that's lying on the floor, but we say don't do it out of concern that then you might do something that really is a problem, which is actually chop the fruit directly from the tree. Higufa gzera vanunekum v'negzer gzera legzera. To which Abai says, I don't understand. Eating fruits that fell from a tree is in itself just a rabbinic prohibition, that we're concerned, look, don't eat the fruits that fell from the tree so that you don't end up eating fruits from the tree. And now Rav Yosef, you want to suggest that don't eat an egg that came from a chicken because then maybe you'll end up eating fruit that fell from a tree, which in and of itself is only so that you don't then end up eating fruits directly from the tree, taking a fruit directly from the tree. So if eating fruits that fell from the tree is in itself a gezerah, only a rabbinic concern, we're not going to create another rabbinic concern to prevent you from violating that other rabbinic concern, which is only there to prevent you from actually doing a problem, right? So if Paris Anoshin is itself a din d'Rabbanan, we're not going to prohibit you from eating the eggs lest you end up doing this other d'Rabbanan thing. We're not going to make gezeras for gezeras. And for the Gemara Chad Gezerah, which the Gemara says no. You have to understand it like this. We're not saying refrain from eating the egg from this chicken so that you don't end up eating Paris Anoshin, which then might lead to eating fruit directly from the tree. No, that's not how to understand it. The way to understand it is that when the Chachamim said, don't eat Paris Anoshin, don't eat fruits that fell from a tree, it also includes don't eat eggs that come from chickens. It's not that don't eat eggs from chickens because then you might eat Paris Anoshin. No. The same reason why you're not eating Paris Anoshin is the same reason also at the same time they said don't eat fruit that fell from a tree. Also don't eat eggs that come from chickens, because we just don't want you eating things that come from other things, lest you might end up chopping a fruit from a tree. Alright, sounds nice. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Gzeir mishum mashkin shezavu. Rabbi Yitzchak says that the reason why we don't eat eggs that came from a chicken is because we're concerned that if you eat eggs that come from a chicken, then you might eat juice that came from a fruit. And we don't want you to eat juice that came from a fruit because then you might end up squeezing the fruit itself. Which Abai says to Rabbi Yitzchak, Mashkin shezavu, taimamai, gzer shem yischok. Abai says, 1 second, Rabbi Yitzchak, I don't understand. How come if I see a fruit, I see an apple, and I see some of the juice came out from the apple, how come I'm not allowed to drink that juice? Well, if I drink that juice, I might end up squeezing the apple directly, which would be a problem, an issue of mefarik, which is a toloda of dash, of extracting. So says Abai, I don't understand. The whole reason why I'm not allowed to drink this apple juice that came out of the apple on its own is because I might end up squeezing, and now you're saying I shouldn't eat the egg that comes from the chicken because then maybe I'll eat the juice that comes from the apple and then maybe I'll actually squeeze the apple? But he gufa gzerav on an ekum v'nigzor gzera l'gzera. So I don't understand. The reason why I'm not allowed to eat the mashkin shezavu, the reason why I'm not allowed to eat this apple juice that came out on its own on Shabbos or Yom Tov, is because then I might end up squeezing the apple itself. So why? It itself is only a gezerah. So now we're going to say don't eat the egg, lest I come to eat the juice that came from the apple, lest I come to do the actual problem, which is squeezing the apple. Kulachad gezerah. To which the Gemara answers no, it's all the same gezerah. That when the rabbi said don't eat the juice that comes from the fruit, also don't eat the egg that comes from the chicken, it's the same gezerah, which is ultimately we want to prevent people from squeezing fruits on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, sounds very nice. So to add to the opinion bank of Rav Nachman and Rabbah, we now have the opinion of Rav Yosef, who says that according to Beis Hillel, we would not eat a Beitzah Shnolda b'Yom Tov because it's in the same category as Paris Anoshin. And Rabbi Yitzchak says that according to Beis Hillel, we do not eat a Beitzah Shnolda b'Yom Tov because it's like mashkin shezavu. Kuluk Rav Nachman lo amri kikushin. Now, says the Gemara, I understand why Rabbah, Rav Yosef, and Rabbi Yitzchak all do not hold like Rav Nachman, because Rabbah, Rav Yosef, and Rav Yitzchak, they're all saying that we're talking about a chicken that's for food. Whereas Rav Nachman says that we're talking about a chicken that is for eggs. And therefore the chicken itself is muktzah, and the egg is also muktzah. And we asked yesterday, well, according to Rav Nachman, why are we only talking about the eggs? We should also talk about the chickens. We should talk about both of them. And therefore, because of that question, Rabbah, Rav Yosef, and Rabbi Yitzchak disagree with Rav Nachman, and they say we're talking about in a chicken for eating, not a chicken for eggs. Fine. So Kuluk Rav Nachman lo Amrei Kikushin. Rabba, Rav Yosef, and Rav Yitzchak do not hold like Rav Nachman because of our question about why we're only talking about eggs, we should talk about the chicken as well. Kirabanami lo Amrei. And I understand why Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchak disagree with Rabba because Achana Leislu. They disagree with Rabba that Achana would be a problem. They're not concerned about Achana. And Rav Yosef, my time Rav Yitzchak, but Rav Yosef, who says that eating an egg that comes from a chicken is a problem just like eating fruit that fell from a tree, why doesn't he hold like Rabbi Yitzchak that it's about the juice that comes from a fruit? Omelach, to which Rav Yosef would respond, the reason why I disagree with Rabbi Yitzchak and I say that it's an issue of Peres Anoshrin rather than Mashkin Shazavu is because Beitzah Ochla Uferis Ochla. Well, because an egg is food. Fruits are food. Lafuki Mashkin, to the exclusion of liquids, Dilav Ochla. They're not food, they're liquids. Therefore, says Rav Yosef, the comparison lines up better to compare an egg to a fruit rather than compare an egg to a liquid. For Rabbi Yitzchak, my time Elo Amar, Rav Yosef. How come Rabbi Yitzchak disagrees with Rav Yosef? Why does Rabbi Yitzchak Davka say we're talking about Mashkin Shazavu? That we said that you're not allowed to eat an egg that comes from a chicken, just like you're not allowed to eat the juice that comes from a fruit. Omar loch Beitzah blua umashkin bluin lafuki peres de megalu v'kaimu. To which Rabbi Yitzchak says, well, because the juice of a fruit is absorbed, is extracted from inside of the fruit. It's absorbed inside of the fruit, and we extract it. It comes out of the fruit. That's similar to an egg, which is inside of the chicken, and the egg comes out of the chicken. Which is not the case when it comes to fruit. Fruits aren't inside the tree. They're hanging from the tree, and they just fall down. And you pluck them. They don't come, they're not extracted from the tree like juice is extracted from the fruit and like an egg comes from inside of the chicken. Therefore, says Rabbi Yitzchak, the comparison of an egg to juice that comes from a fruit is a stronger comparison than to fruits that are exposed and hanging on the fruit. And says the Gemara that also Rabbi Yochanan holds that the reason why Beis Hillel says that we do not eat a Beitzah Shnolda B'Yom Tiv is because of Mashkin Shazavu like Rabbi Yitzchak. Let's see. Do Rabbi Yochanan Rami? Do Rabbi Yehuda? Because Rabbi Yochanan asked a kasha between two opinions of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda seems to have two conflicting opinions. Umishani, and then he answers it. Tanan, we learn in the Mishnah. Ein sochatin esaperes lo tzimein mashkin, v'im yotzu mi'atzman asurin. So the Tanna Kama says that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you're not allowed to extract juice from fruits. That on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you're not allowed to extract juice from fruits. And if the juice comes out on its own, you're not allowed to drink it. Leave it alone. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, Im le'ochlin ayotze me'en mutter. Rabbi Yehuda says, wait a second. If you collected these fruits to eat, and now some of the juice comes out of the fruits, so that's not your intention. You want the juice to stay in the fruit. You want to eat the fruit. So because it doesn't benefit you in any way from the fact that the juice came out of the fruit, you're allowed to eat this juice. But if you had picked the fruits and collected the fruits so that you can squeeze them and extract their juice, well then, any juice that comes out of it, you want the juice to come out of it. Because you want the juice to come out of it, we say that you're not allowed to drink this juice that came out on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Wait till after Shabbos or Yom Tov. Fine. Amakol ochlin, the Rabbi Yehuda ochlin de ifrasu. So what do we see? So we see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, anything that kind of is separated, that comes out from food, so it's just considered food that got separated, right? Rabbi Yehuda is saying that if you have these fruits and they were collected for food, and now the juice came out on its own from the fruits, so it's ochla deifras, it's just food that got separated from other food, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, fine. Vira minu, but we have a question. V'od Amar Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda says, Masna Adam al kalkola shel peres b'yom tev rishon v'ochla b'sheni. Says Rabbi Yehuda that in the event that, right, so if there are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so now we're going to get more into detail about exactly how to relate to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. To relate to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah as one Yom Tiv, or maybe as, is it a question of Sfeika Diyoma, or is it that it's Mamish 2 days of Yom Tiv, that they're both Mamish Yom Tiv, there's no suffix over here. We treat them both as Yom Tiv. So now, the assumption right now is that if we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, it's because of Sfeika Diyoma. That we're not sure which day is the first day of Tishrei. Now, if we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, it means Memele, that one of them is actually the first day of Tishrei, and one of them isn't. One of them is Rosh Hashanah, one of them isn't. So now says Rabbi Yehuda, in the event that let's say you have a basket full of fruits, and you forgot to separate the tithes before Rosh Hashanah started. And now it's Rosh Hashanah, it's 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and you want to be able to eat the fruits. So what can you do? You didn't separate Trumas and Maasros before Rosh Hashanah. You're not allowed to separate Trumas and Maasros on Rosh Hashanah because it's Misakin Kli. Oh, not a Kli, but it's Misakin, you're fixing it. We don't want you to do that on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So what can you do? So says Rabbi Yehuda, look, one of these days of Rosh Hashanah, and again, we're going to see, we're going to get it later, not today, but later on, we're going to get into more detail about how exactly to relate to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. After all, right, people live in Eretz Yisrael. We celebrate 2 days of Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael, right? Whereas when it comes to Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuos, we keep 1 day of Yom Tov. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we keep 2 days of Yom Tov. So it's not about Sfeika Diyoma per se. We're going to see. But right now, we're assuming that it is about Sfeika Diyoma. And therefore, when it comes to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, one of them is Rosh Hashanah. One of them isn't Rosh Hashanah. And we're just keeping 2 days because we're not sure which one is actually Rosh Hashanah and which one isn't. So we keep 2 days. Fine. So it says Rabbi Yehuda, if you have this basket full of fruits, and you didn't separate Trumas and Maasros before Rosh Hashanah, and you want to be able to eat them, so what can you do? So, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you separate Trumas and Maasros, and you put them aside. Now, you still can't eat the rest of the fruits, because in case today is actually really Rosh Hashanah, which is Yom Tif, I'm not allowed to separate Trumas and Maasros on Yom Tif. So therefore, I'm not allowed to eat the rest of the fruits today, just in case it's Yom Tif. But tomorrow, I can eat the fruits. How come? Because I'll do the same thing again tomorrow. I'll separate the same fruits that I separated the day before. I'll separate them again on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And then, Memele, I can eat the rest of the fruits. How come? Well, because if the first day of Rosh Hashanah was actually Yom Tif, so then separating the fruits yesterday didn't do anything. But that means that today is actually a weekday. Which means that today, on day 2, when I separate the fruits as Trumas and Maasros, so I'm actually separating Trumas and Maasros. Now it's a weekday, and now I can eat the rest of the fruits. And if today is actually Yom Tif, and yesterday was a weekday, so when I separated the Trumas and Maasros yesterday, I actually separated them. And already from yesterday, this is no longer Tevel, I can eat the fruits. So Memela on day 2, I can definitely eat the fruits. Okay, fine. So again, so Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Masna Adam al Kakola Shel Peres B'Yom Tiv Rishon, a fellow can make a Tnai, a condition, when he separates Trumas and Maasros from a basket of fruits on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. V'ochel b'sheni, then Memele, he could separate the same fruits again on day 2, and then Memele, he can eat the rest of the fruits, because whether today is a weekday or yesterday was a weekday, one of them was a weekday, and he certainly separated Trumas and Maasros, and therefore on day 2, he can eat the rest of the fruits. Beitzah shenolda barishon te'achol b'sheni. And similarly, says Rabbi Yehuda, if you have an egg that was born on the first day of Yom Tov, you can eat it on the second day of Yom Tov. Because Memele, one of them was a weekday. So if the first day of Yom Tov was a weekday, well then there's nothing wrong with this egg. It was born on a weekday. And if the first day of Yom Tov was actually Yom Tov, so now day 2 is not Yom Tov. If it's not technically Yom Tov, there's nothing wrong with eating this egg. So says Rabbi Yehuda that an egg that was born on that was laid on the first day of Yom Tov, you can eat it on the second day of Yom Tov Memele. Umishani. So what's the kasha? Right, so Basheni in, Barishon lo. The kasha is that we're saying Davka that you're allowed to eat the egg on the second day of Yom Tov. That if you have an egg that was laid on the first day of Yom Tov, you're allowed to eat it on the second day of Yom Tov Memele. The question is, why can't I eat it even on the first day of Yom Tov? Because after all, it's ochla de ifras. If we're saying that this is a chicken that's for eating, and this egg comes from the chicken, it's just, the egg is food that came from the chicken, which is also food. So what's the problem? Because after all, Rabbi Yehuda said in the first Beitzah, Rabbi Yehuda said, or I think was it even a Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda said in the original Mishnah that if you had collected the fruits for eating, then any juice that comes out of the fruits on Shabbos or Yom Tov, you're allowed to drink that juice. Because since you collected the fruits for eating, so it's just basically food that got separated from other food, you're allowed to drink it. Well, if that's the case, then shouldn't Rabbi Yehuda also say, when it comes to a chicken that lays an egg on Yom Tov, who cares? The egg is food that came from other food. What's the problem? Yet he says that when it comes to the egg, you can only eat it on day 2. Why can't I eat it on day 1? Just like I could drink the juice that came from the fruit. If I collected the fruit for eating, so I should also be able to eat the egg that comes from the chicken, assuming that the chicken is for eating. Umishani Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan answers, Muchlefes Hashita. So the way that Rabbi Yochanan answers this question is by saying in the Mishnah, in the original Mishnah, when it comes to the juice that came out of the fruit, the opinions are backwards. That Rabbi Yehuda is actually the opinion of that the opinion of the Tanna Kama is actually Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which is that no matter what, you're not allowed to drink this juice. That if you have juice that came out of this fruit, you're not allowed to drink it on Shabbos or Yom Tov, regardless of if the fruit was collected for food or for juice. Regardless, you're not allowed to consume that juice on Shabbos or Yom Tov. And then Memele, this whole thing of like Rabbi Yehuda saying that food that comes from other food is permitted, clearly that doesn't seem to be the case. Because if we say that Rabbi Yehuda says that no matter what, you're not allowed to drink this juice even when it was collected for food, so that means that just like the juice that comes from the fruit, you're not allowed to drink. So that now it also makes sense to say that the egg that comes from the chicken, you're not allowed to eat that either. You have to wait till day 2, because then Memele, one of the days was a weekday, and therefore you'll be able to eat it on day 2. So now says the Gemara, and from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan asks his question, right, that we have a Mishnah and a Beitzah. Right, what was his question? His question was that, well, in the Mishnah it seems to be that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that mashkin shezavu, that when you have this liquid that comes out of the fruit, we seem to be saying that, well, right, the question was that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it seems to be that as long as you collected the fruit for eating, you'd be allowed to drink the liquid. And yet, when it comes to an egg, he says that if the egg comes out of the chicken, you're not allowed to eat the egg. So we see he's asking his question from mashkin shezavu and comparing that to Beitzah shenolda, an egg that comes from a chicken. So clearly, Rabbi Yochanan, therefore, must be holding like Rabbi Yitzchak, that the reason why Beis Hillel says that you're not allowed to eat a Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov is because of a gzera of mashkin shezavu, as we see by Rabbi Yochanan's comparison of Beitzah shenolda to mashkin shezavu. Ravina Omar. So Ravina answers the same question, right? The same question of how do you understand the Mishnah where Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying that as long as you collected the fruits for food, you'd be allowed to eat the juice. And yet, when it comes to an egg that was laid on Yom Tif, he seems to be saying that you're not allowed to eat the egg, even though it's both a situation of ochla de ifras, food that got separated from other food. Ravina Amr Olam Lo Tepuch. Says Ravina, you don't have to switch anything around. So how do you understand the Mishnah and the Beitzah? Rabbi Yehuda the Devarim de Rabbanon Ka'amar Lehu. That Rabbi Yehuda in the Beitzah, that when Rabbi Yehuda says that you're not allowed to eat an egg on the first day, you have to wait till the second day, that's not his opinion. No, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, just like when it comes to the fruit, that if you collected it for food, you're allowed to drink the juice that came out on its own. So also, he would say, look, when it comes to an egg, the chicken is for food. So the egg that comes from the chicken, memele, I'm allowed to eat, even on the first day of Yom Tif. There's no kasha. Rabbi Yehuda is just responding, he's questioning the rabbis. Rabbi Yehuda says, look, I disagree with you people. I say that even on day one, you're allowed to eat the egg because it's ochla de ifras. It's just food that came from other food. But the didi afilu barisho nami shari the ochla de ifras. So he says, look, I say you can even eat the egg on day one of Yom Tif because it's just food that got separated from other food. Ella, the didchu odu limias. But according to you, that you say that you're not allowed to eat the egg on Yom Tif. Odu limias, nonetheless, but at least admit to me, to b'sheni sharia, the shtei kedusha saying, at least admit to me that you can eat the egg on the second day of Yom Tif, because it's two separate days, it's two separate kedushos, it's a sveika diyoma, that really there's just one day of Rosh Hashanah. We're not sure which day it is, so we keep 2 days to make sure that definitely we are keeping Rosh Hashanah. One of them is gonna memela be a weekday. One of them is gonna be actually Rosh Hashanah. One day is gonna be Rosh Hashanah, one day isn't. We don't know which is which, so we keep both of them as though they're Rosh Hashanah. So says Rabbi Yehuda, look, at least admit to me, even if you want to say that an egg that was laid on Yom Tif, you're not allowed to eat it, but definitely on the second day you should be allowed to eat it because they're two separate days, Sveika Diyoma. One of them, memela, is a weekday. So then, by day 2, I should be allowed to eat the egg, since, if day 1 was a weekday, so it was laid on a weekday, who cares? And if day 2 is a weekday, so now it's a weekday, I can eat it on a weekday, even if it was laid on Yom Tov. V'amrile Rabbanan lo kedusha achasi. To which the rabbis respond to Rabbi Yehuda, as we're going to learn, I believe tomorrow, so the rabbis respond to Rabbi Yehuda and say, no, actually, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it's not about Sveika Diyoma. It's not, one day is Rosh Hashanah, one day isn't, and we just don't know which one it is. Actually, 2 days are mamish both Yom Tif. It's mamish 2 days of Yom Tif of Rosh Hashanah, and it's like one long day. It's like a Yom Aricha. It's like one long day. And therefore, just like I'm not allowed to eat this egg on day 1, I'm also not allowed to eat it on day 2 either. Okay. Ravina Breder of Ula, Omar, Ravina Breder of Ula answers the question by saying, Hocha b'tana goles, ha'omedus legadol beitzim, Ravina l'taime, de islay muktzeh. So, Ravina Breder of Ula answers this question, right? The Mishnah where Rabbi Yehuda says that you're allowed to eat the juice that came from the fruit, as long as the fruit was collected for food. Yet, when it comes to the egg, Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to eat the egg from the chicken on day 1, you have to wait till day 2. How come? So it says Ravina Breder of Ula, Hocha b'tarnagolas ha'omedus legadol beitzim. Says Ravina Breder of Ula that Rabbi Yehuda is talking about, in the Beitzah with Rabbi Yehuda, we're talking about a chicken, an egg producing chicken, not for eating, it's for eggs, and therefore it's muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda l'taime de islay muktzah. And Rabbi Yehuda is according to his reasoning that, of course, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is you have to be concerned about muktzah. And therefore, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda had said that you're allowed to eat the juice that comes from the fruit because it's ochla defras. right? If you collected the fruit for food, so then the juice that comes from it is juice that came from food. Ochlet ifras, it's food that got separated from food, you're allowed to eat it. However, when it comes to the Beitzah Shenolda B'Yom Tov, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying wait till the next day, you're not allowed to eat it on day one, that's a separate, completely separate reason. It's because we're talking about a chicken that's for eggs, an egg producing chicken. So it's muktzah. And because it's muktzah, its eggs is also muktzah. And therefore you're not allowed to eat it on day one, you have to wait till day two, only on day two can you eat it. Okay, that sounds very nice to me. Meisvei. Now we have a kasha. Givaldig. Now we have a kasha. We've seen so far 4 opinions to explain the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel when it comes to an egg that's laid on Yom Tov. The opinion of Rabbah, the opinion of Rav Nachman, who says that we're talking about an egg, a chicken, an egg-laying chicken, and therefore it's muksa. We have the opinion of Rabbah and Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchak, who all say that we're talking about a chicken that is for eating. Rabbah says that the concern with the egg is that if it's born on a Sunday, then memele, it was prepared on a Shabbos, and therefore you can never eat an egg that was laid on Yom Tov out of concern for when Yom Tov is on Sunday. Rav Yosef says that you're not allowed to eat an egg that comes from a chicken on Yom Tov because just like you're not allowed to eat fruit that falls off of a tree. And Rabbi Yitzchak says that you're not allowed to eat an egg that comes from a chicken because just like you're not allowed to eat juice that comes from a fruit. Fine. Meisvei, we have a kasha. Echad Beitzah shenolda b'Shabbos v'echad Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov. So if you have an egg that was laid on Shabbos or an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, ein metaltlin osa, it's muktzah, you're not allowed to move it. Lo lechasos ba esakli, not to, you can't use it to cover a vessel. Lo lismoch ba karyamita, you can't use it in order to support the legs of a bed. Okay, put it underneath the bed or something, it'll keep it stable. But you can take a vessel and overturn it over the egg so that it doesn't break. Usveika asura. And its suffix is asur. Let's get back to that in a second. And if it gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, they're all asur. Let's go back to the sveika thing for a second. We're saying that its sveika is asura. That if you're not sure if this egg was laid on Yom Tov or if it was laid on a weekday, you're not allowed to eat it. Okay, so we're saying that if it's a suffix around this egg, that if this Beitzah Shenolda B'Yom Tov, if this egg that was born on Yom Tov, we're not actually sure if it was actually born on Yom Tov, laid on Yom Tov, maybe it was taka laid during the week. So we say that it's asur. And then we say, V'im Nesarva Be'elev Kulan Asuris, and if this egg gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, it's also asur. Okay? So Bishlama Liraba, right. So again, so if this egg that was born on that was laid on Yom Tov gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, all of the 1,000 eggs are forbidden now. Fine. Bishlama l'Rabba da'amar mishum achane. So I understand Rabba's opinion. What's Rabba's opinion? Rabba's opinion is that when you have an egg that's born on Yom Tov, so if you have an egg that's born on Yom Tov, so you're not allowed to eat it because, if Yom Tov falls out on a Sunday and the egg was laid on a Sunday, so memele, it was prepared, it was ready to be laid already the day before on Shabbos. And you have achana from Shabbos to Yom Tov, which is an Isser Deoraisa, according to Rabbah. So he says, Avisveka Deoraisa. So we said in the Brisa that if there's a suffix regarding this egg, so let's say this egg was born on Sunday night, Yom Tov was Sunday, the egg was born Sunday night, Ben Hashmoshes, so we're not sure if it was born on Yom Tov or it was born during the week, so it's a suffix. If it was born during the week, it's permitted. If it's born on Yom Tov, it's not going to be allowed right now. So it's a suffix if it was Beitzah Shnolda b'Yom Tov or not. And according to Rabbah, this is a Safek D'Oraisa, because if it was born on Yom Tov, so then the Achana for the egg was on Shabbos, and therefore it would make it an Isser D'Oraisa, and therefore, V'chosfek D'Oraisa l'chumra. And whenever we have a Safek, a doubt, when it comes to a D'Oraisa, so we have to be stringent, and that's why we say that Sfeika Asura, that if there's a Safek, if there's a doubt regarding this egg, if maybe it was born on Yom Tov, or maybe it was born during the week, we have to be stringent and say that it's forbidden. At least until after Yom Tov. Rav Yosef or Rabbi Yitzchak. But according to Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak, who say that the reason why we don't eat this egg is for the same reason that we don't eat fruits that fall from a tree, or that we don't eat juice that comes from a fruit, i.e., it's also midrabanan. Well then, well then, if we're not sure if this egg was born on Yom Tov or if it was born during the week, so then, meaning it's a suffix, we're not sure if it was born on Yom Tov or during the week, and if it was born on Yom Tov, it would be also midrabanan, out of concern for either fruits that fell from a tree or juice that comes from a fruit. And if we're not sure if this egg was born on Yom Tov or if it was born during the week, and if it were to be born on Yom Tov, it would be also midrabanan, that means that we're besafek about a derabanan. It's a sfeik derabanan, and it should be the kula. We should be lenient and say that sfeika should be permitted. Why does the Beitzah say that it is forbidden? So it's a kasha on Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchak, who say that the reason why you're not allowed to eat this egg is because of a gzeir derabanan. But if that's the case, then in a case of safek, it should be permitted. Yet the Beitzah seems to be saying it's forbidden. So the Gemara answers, Seif Asa on the Safek Treifa. Says the Gemara that the Beitzah actually switches in the middle. That while the first part of the Beitzah was talking about an egg that was born on Shabbos or an egg that was born on Yom Tov, once it gets to the Safek part, it's actually talking about something completely different. It's talking about an egg that may or may not have come from a chicken that was a treifa. And it has nothing to do with Shabbos Yom Tov. This could be during the week. That if you have an egg that you're besafek, you're not sure, did this egg come from a chicken that was a treifa or not? Well then, treifa is midoraisa. So it's a safek deoraisa. Therefore we have to go lechumra and say that it's asura. Yachi, but if that's the case, ema seifa, if we continue reading the Beitzah, what does it say? Nisaiva be'elef kulan asuris. That if this egg gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, all of them are forbidden. Yom b'shlama safek yom tiv safek chol. So I understand why this egg would be, why if this egg gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, all of them would be forbidden. I understand that if the safek that we're talking about, if we're talking about an egg that may or may not have been born on Yom Tov. That because now, if you have an egg that may or may not have been born on Yom Tov, and then it gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, well then, avidavar sheyesh lo matirin. It's something that will inevitably become permitted, right? Meaning, if we're not sure if this egg was born on Yom Tov, in which case it's not, you wouldn't be allowed to eat it, or if it was born during the week, in which case you are allowed to eat it. So we'll say, look, just wait a little bit longer until it becomes a weekday, and then you can eat it. And because eventually this egg will become permissible to eat, therefore you're not allowed to eat any of the 1,000 eggs temporarily, until this one egg that got mixed together with the other 1,000 becomes able to eat once Yom Tov is over. And then you can eat all of the eggs. So therefore, if you say that the suffix, that the doubt around this egg is whether it was born on Yom Tov or whether it was born during the week, so then I understand why the Beitzah continues and says that if this egg becomes mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, I'm not allowed to eat any of them. Because just wait a little bit longer until after Yom Tov, then you can eat all of the eggs. Anything that will ultimately become permitted, even if it gets mixed together with 1,000 other things, it doesn't become batal. It's significant and you can't have any of them. Because just wait until it becomes permitted and then the whole doubt goes away. But if, as you're suggesting, when it says in the Beitzah that if there's a suffix, it's a surah, it's talking about a suffix of a treifa, which is a suffix to oraisa, well then, davar she'ein lo matirini. Well, a suffix treifa is something that's never going to go away. If we're not sure if this egg came from a chicken that's a treifa, well then, that's it. I mean, it's a problem. We don't know the answer. It's a suffix, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, tivato beruba. Well, then in that case, if it gets mixed together, if this egg that will never become permitted then gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, and we're not sure which egg is the suffix treifa, well then it should just be batal barov. 1,000 against one, the one egg should just become batal. In the case where it was a suffix, if it was born on Yom Tov or during the week, so it's a davar sheish lo matir, and it's something that will ultimately become permitted once Yom Tov is over. So just wait. You're not allowed to have any of the eggs. But in the case where we're talking about a suffix treifa, and that's where we're saying that tzveika is asura, but then if it gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, you should be allowed to eat the eggs because it should be batal barov. Mechitema Beitzah chshuva v'lo betela. And if you want to suggest, well, an egg is a significant thing. An egg is a significant thing. And because it's a significant thing, it will never be batal. And because it will never be batal, so you basically have to be concerned that, any of the eggs would be the forbidden one. But says the Gemara, so to make the argument that an egg is considered significant, so if you hold that anything that is sold in by specific numbers is significant, so then I understand it. Let's go back to for a second. But if your opinion is that something is only significant if it's exclusively sold by numbers, so then an egg doesn't fit that bill. What does that mean? So currently we buy an egg, buy eggs, a dozen eggs, right? So it's sold in number, as opposed to, let's say, nuts, right? Let's say you go to in Shuk Machne Yehuda, you go and buy some cashews or something. You're not going to buy 100 cashews. You'll buy a scoop full of cashews, maybe a kilo of cashews, whatever it's going to be. But you're not buying a specific number of cashews. Eggs, you buy a dozen eggs. Now, the thing is, but when it comes to eggs, you presumably could also buy eggs, I don't know, by weight or something like that, or, maybe a bag full of eggs. I don't know. Meaning, generally we buy it by number, but it doesn't exclusively have to be sold by number. Presumably you could buy like a box full of eggs or something, and maybe you'll get a little more, maybe you'll get a little bit less. So, there are two ways of understanding significance, right? One way of understanding is anything that could be sold by number, such as eggs, right? You could buy a dozen eggs. So that's already considered significant. The other way to understand it is it has to be something that's exclusively sold by number. Now, eggs don't necessarily fill that bill because you could, right? It says Rashi, there are people who, I guess, do also sell eggs, not necessarily specifically by number, but maybe by weight or something like that, in which case it's not necessarily a number thing. So if you say, so now going back to our Beitzah, right? We're saying that, right, the question was that if we say that the Beitzah, when it says a suffix, it's talking about a suffix treifa, that maybe this egg came from a chicken that is a treifa. And because it's a suffix treifa, it's a suffix d'oraisa, and that's why we say it's asura. But then the Beitzah continued and saying, now if this egg gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, you're not allowed to eat any of them. So the question was, wait, but if it's talking about a suffix treifa, shouldn't it just be batal barov? To which the Gemara says, well, maybe it's not batal barov because an egg is significant, and if it's significant, it can't be batal barov. So I understand why an egg would be considered significant if we hold that something that could be sold by number, that is sometimes, or even many times, but is sold by number, is already considered significant. Well, eggs are sold by number. You buy a dozen eggs. They're sold by number, and therefore they're significant, and therefore they cannot be batal. But if you hold the opinion that says that in order for something to be considered significant, it has to be exclusively sold by number, well, eggs don't fill that bill because potentially you could buy eggs by weight or by some other measure, and therefore they wouldn't necessarily be significant. And if they're not necessarily significant, then shouldn't they just be batal birov? Ditnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, Mishayu chavile tilson. A fellow has bundles of fenugreek, shel kilei akarim, and this isn't just any fenugreek, it's fenugreek that's kilei akarim, which means that it's also ba'anoah. Yidalku, right? They got like mixed together with grapes and with grape seeds, and they grew together in a vineyard. That's what's called kilei akarim, kilayim. That it's like a mixture of grapes and something else. In this case, fenugreek. So it's also ba'anoah. It's also yidalku. You have to burn all of it. Nisarvu ba'acheros v'acheros ba'acheros. Now, if the fenugreek got mixed together, this fenugreek of kilei akarim got mixed together with other things, kulan yidalku divrei Meir, says Reb Meir, you have to burn all of it. I don't care how much you get. I don't care how large the ratio is against the kilei akarim fenugreek. You're going to have to burn all of it. Whereas the Chachamim say, Yalu b'achas u'masoyim. Whereas the Chachamim say, no, it could be batal if you have 200 times the kilei akarim, so then the kilei akarim could be batal. Fine. Shoy Reb Meir Omer, because Reb Meir would say, Es shedarko limanos mikadesh. That's something, and we're going to see it's machlokas between Reb Yochanan and Rish Lakish about how exactly to understand this, but something that is sold by number is going to be significant, and therefore it's going to make the whole mixture a problem. You have to burn everything. V'chacham Omer is what Chachamim say, Einu mekadesh ala shisha dvarim. There are only 6 things that are considered significant. Bilvad, Rabbi Akiva Omer Shiva. Rabbi Akiva says there are 7 of them. Ve'eluhein, these are them. Egoze perech, rimoni baidon. These nuts from this place called Perech. These pomegranates from a place called Baidon. V'chavio stumos, and closed barrels. V'chilfei tradin, and prickly beets. V'kilchei kruv, stalks of cabbage. V'dlas ivanis, Greek gourds. Rabbi Akiva Mosef Kikro Shabbat Abayis. Rabbi Akiva also adds loaves of homemade loaves of bread. That is those are the things that are considered significant. However, that of those significant things, the ones that are relevant to orla, so it will be a problem of orla mixtures. The ones that are relevant to kilei akarim would be problems of kilei akarim mixtures. Fine. The Idmar Lanu was stated about Reb Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan Omer es shedarko limanos shaninu limnos shaninu v'Reb Shimon ben Lakish Omer kol shedarko limnos shaninu. And regarding Rabbi Meir's opinion, Reb Meir had said, what did Reb Meir say? That he says when it comes to the fenugreek, he says, Reb Meir Omer es shedarko limnos mekadesh. That something that is counted is going to be significant, and you're going to have to burn the entire mixture. And says Reb Yochanan es shedarko limnos shaninu, that Reb Meir is saying that something that is exclusively sold by number, that is exclusively counted, that is something that's considered significant. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Omer kol shedarko limnos shaninu. Whereas Reb Shimon ben Lakish says no, anything that even sometimes is counted is already considered significant. And now says the Gemara, Hanicha Reb Shimon ben Lakish Reb Yochanan ma'ikil meimar. So I understand Rish Lakish's opinion, which is something that is even sometimes sold by number is considered significant. So according to Rish Lakish, I can understand why this egg that is a suffix treifa, if it gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, why you can't have any of them? Because an egg is something that is sometimes or even often sold by number, even though it's not necessarily exclusively sold by number, but it is sold by number, at least sometimes or even often. So therefore, we can consider it significant, and therefore it's not going to be batal even in 1,000. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that in order for something to be considered significant, according to Reb Meir, it would have to be exclusively sold by number. Well, eggs don't fit that bill. So if that's the case, then who's the author of the Beitzah that says that if this egg that's a suffix treifa gets mixed together with 1,000 other eggs, all of them you can't have any of them? Why not? Why wouldn't we say it's batal barov? And according to Rabbi Yochanan, the way that he explains to Reb Meir, eggs would not be considered significant. So why are they not batal barov? Chevre, I'm kind of in the middle of a sugya over here, but it goes on for quite a while. So we're going to have to stop in the middle of shtickle. But Chevre, that was kind of like a dense daf over here. Daf Gimel of Masechta Beitzah. Friends, what did we learn about today? We saw two more opinions about how to understand the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding Beitzah Shenolda B'Yom Tov. That Beis Hillel's opinion is that you're not allowed to eat the egg. And the question is, why not? He says Rav Yosef that, we're talking about a chicken that's food, and theoretically you should be able to eat the egg, but just like you're not allowed to eat fruits that fall from a tree, you're not allowed to eat this egg that comes from the chicken. Rav Yitzchak says similarly, that just like you're not allowed to eat juice that comes from a fruit, you're also not allowed to eat this egg that comes from a chicken. Okay, fine. Then in explaining Rabbi Yochanan to say that Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Rabbi Yitzchak that the reason why you're not allowed to eat an egg that comes from a chicken is for the same reason that you're not allowed to eat the juice that comes from a fruit, that in that case you might end up squeezing. So we saw trying to understand Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, in that in one place he seems to be saying that any food that comes from another food is permitted, i.e. because he says that if juice comes out on its own from a fruit on Shabbos, you're allowed to drink that juice because food that comes from food is allowed. And yet we have a brisa where Rabbi Yehuda says that you're not allowed to eat an egg that comes from a chicken on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. You have to wait till the second day. So, but if it's food that came from other food, shouldn't that be allowed? So Rabbi Yochanan answers the question by saying that, well, you have to flip around the Mishnah and say actually that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that when food comes from other food, you're not allowed to eat it. And therefore, if the juice comes out from the fruit on Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat it, even if the fruit was collected for food. And that is also why he says that you're not allowed to eat a egg that comes from a chicken on Yom Tov, because you're not allowed to eat food that comes from other food. You have to wait till the next day. Ravina says that actually the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is that you would be allowed to eat food that comes from other food. That actually, right, that Rabbi Yehuda would say that if juice comes from fruit, if that fruit was collected for food, then you'd be allowed to eat the fruit. And also an egg that comes from a chicken, you're allowed to eat the egg. When he says that you have to wait till day 2, he's only saying that according to the rabbis. That according to the rabbis who say that you're not allowed to eat the egg that comes from that you're not allowed to eat food that comes from other food. So therefore you wouldn't be allowed to eat an egg that comes from a chicken. But says Rabbi Yehuda to the rabbis, but you should at least say that on day 2 you'd be allowed to eat the egg that comes from the chicken, because it's a Sveika Diyoma, one of them was actually a weekday. To which the rabbis say, no, actually when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, they're both considered Yom Tov. It's like one long day of Yom Tov, and you would not be allowed to eat this egg on either day. Then we saw the opinion of Ravina Breder of Ula, who says that what's going on here is it's apples and oranges. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says that you're allowed to eat the juice that comes from the fruit because you're allowed to eat food that comes from other food. But the reason why you're not allowed to eat the egg that comes from the chicken on Yom Tov, you have to wait till the next day, is because it's muktzah. Because it's muktzah, you're not allowed to, Rabbi Yehuda says, if it's muktzah, you wouldn't be allowed to eat it. Fine. And then, at the end, we brought a question against Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak from a brisa that says that if there is a suffix regarding this egg, and it seems to be if the suffix is, we're not sure if the egg was born on Yom Tov or if it was born during the week, it's asur. And the question is, according to Rabbi Yitzchak and Rav Yosef, the only reason why you're not allowed to eat the egg on Yom Tov is a gzeira d'Rabbanan. Right? Maybe, right, because it's like fruit that fell from a tree, or it's like a juice that came out of a fruit. Now, if it's only a d'Rabbanan, then in the case of a suffix, if we're not sure if it was born on Shabbos or on Yom Tov or during the week, so it should be permitted. So the way that we answered it is to say that, well, we're talking about we're not talking about the Beitzah Shenolda b'Shabbos or Yom Tov, we're talking about a egg that was laid, and we're not sure if maybe the mother was a treifa, and therefore the egg is not allowed. That's why we're saying that its suffix is also because it's an Issur D'Oraisa about if it came from a treifa or not, then it wouldn't be allowed Midoraisa. To which we said, but then how do you understand that we say that if it gets mixed together with 1,000 eggs, all of them are asur? I don't understand why all of them would be asur. Because after all, they should be batal barov. So then that said, well, if we say that an egg is significant, well then it won't be batal barov. So then, well, how will we say an egg is significant? Well, if we say that something that is sold by number is significant, well, eggs are sold by number. However, and therefore it's not batal. But there's another opinion, which is that in order for it to be significant, it has to be exclusively sold by number. Eggs aren't exclusively sold by number, so therefore maybe they would not be considered chashuv. If they're not considered chashuv, so then shouldn't we say that they're batal barov? And that's kind of where we kind of left off on a cliffhanger, right? So Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that in order for something to be considered significant, they would have to be exclusively sold by number. If that's the case, eggs don't fit that bill, so then shouldn't they be batal barov? Whereas Rish Lakish's opinion is that no, even something that's sometimes sold by number is considered significant, and therefore eggs are considered significant, and that's why they're not batal barov. And we're going to have to pick up from here tomorrow. Chevre, get some rest. I'll catch you all tomorrow. Cheers.